Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Apalachicola Chattahoochee Flint River Basin Drought and Water webinar for the month of January, our first webinar of 2022. If this is your first time or if you haven't been back in a while, a quick reminder that we'll have time for comments, questions, and discussion at the end of our webinar. But if you have questions throughout, feel free to use the question box on your GoToWebinar tool panel, or you can raise your hand by pushing the hand icon on that same tool panel. My name's Rachel McGuire, and I'm with the Auburn University Water Resources Center that's located in Auburn, Alabama. Today's speakers will be David Sirden, the Florida State climatologist at Florida State University. He'll present our current drought status as well as our seasonal forecasts and outlooks. We have Tom Littlepage, Branch Chief of the Alabama Office of Water Resources with State of Alabama input. Paul Ankhorn with USGS South Atlantic Water Science Center will present on our stream flows and groundwater conditions. We have Jody Juan of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Mobile District with our Acf Reservoir Conditions. Samantha Lucas of the Apalachicola Bay National Estuarine Research Reserve will give us salinity data for the Apalachicola Bay. Jeff Dober of the Southeast River Forecast Center will give us our seasonal outlooks. And we will wrap up with an introduction to the newly launched Acf River Basin Drought and Water Dashboard by Meredith Muth with NIDIS. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to our first speaker, David Sirden.
All right, well, thank you very much. It's good to be back together after taking the month of December off. We'll go ahead and get started. And what I want to talk about is kind of the current conditions or current weather and climate patterns that are in the news. And we really had a very warm start to the winter of 2021-2022. Over on the right shows temperature departure from normal from about the first week of December through the first week of January. And you see all the stations in the dark red are 8 to 10 degrees above normal as far as average temperature for that 30-day period, which covers most of the Southeast, Alabama, Georgia, North Florida. Some of the consequences of this warm weather. Over on the left is a photo from Bob Kemerate at University of Georgia showing a soybean field that's covered with volunteers right there in the first week of January. While these won't last and are probably done for after the last round of freezing temperatures, it's kind of a stark illustration of just how warm temperatures were to begin our winter. And some of the concerns are pests like nematodes and some other pests that will survive the winter or overwinter much better with these warmer temperatures. So these recent rounds of cold weather, and we expect another shot this coming weekend, certainly good news and should help with the pest and disease. On the next slide, some other topics in the news. For the past 3-4 weeks or more, we've been in a very active pattern and a storm track with the jet stream tracking fairly far south. We've had a couple bouts of severe weather. I think we all know well the December 10th and 11th outbreak across Kentucky and parts of the Midwest. Here you see all the tornado warnings and verified tornado touchdowns from that outbreak, one of the worst December outbreaks ever. And then also Southwest Florida got a shot of severe weather on January 16th, where 21 tornado warnings were issued. Luckily, there were no fatalities, but certainly one of the most active days ever for Southwest Florida, certainly in the absence of a hurricane. So we've had our share of severe weather this winter. On the next slide, we've also had some bouts of winter weather. Over on the top left is a satellite image showing the snow cover across the Carolinas and Virginia from last weekend's winter weather event there. Over on the bottom left shows minimum temperatures on the morning of January 24th, I believe it was, where there were 20s across the state of Florida as far south as Brooksville and Tarpon Springs. Many of the farmers, blueberry, strawberry growers had to apply irrigation for cold protection that morning. And over on the right is kind of the current weather map for today. It shows a continuation of this active pattern. A pretty vigorous Gulf low is impacting the state of Florida today. Over in the Four Corners region, you see another low pressure system, which is going to move east and is forecast to really turn into a bomb cyclone off the northeast United States coast and possibly bring blizzard conditions to portions of New England this coming weekend. So we continue this really active pattern with the active storm track and jet stream right now. So we'll go on to the next slide and start looking at drought. And thanks to some rain last week, the ACF remains drought free. We had abnormally dry or D0 conditions all across the lower ACF and Florida Panhandle, but recent rain has cleared some of that out, at least temporarily. We also see some abnormally dry or even moderate drought conditions in pockets creeping into southwest Alabama. And of course, dry conditions persist across northern South Carolina and North Carolina. So on the next slide, we'll look at the lawn and garden moisture index, which is not quite as applicable during the winter times when it's based on only effective precipitation over several weeks of ½ an inch, but it does show moist conditions across all of the ACF Basin, the states of Alabama, Georgia, and the Florida Panhandle. So we'll go on to the next slide and start looking at recent rainfall. And these are 7-day totals, radar estimated from the National Weather Service. And we see amounts of basically a ½ inch to an inch over the majority of the ACF Basin, a little more amounts approaching 1 inch in the lower ACF and the Florida Panhandle. On the next slide, we'll look at a little further back, and now we're looking at 30-day precipitation totals. And we see good coverage across most of the southeast, especially northern Alabama, where amounts range from 6 to 8 inches to even some pockets of 10 inches or more north of Montgomery and around the Huntsville area. Not quite as much in northern Georgia, but still plentiful rainfall for the headwaters region. Now we're looking even further back at 90-day precipitation. Instead of totals, we're now looking at departures from normal. And we see kind of a mixed bag, but pretty much near normal precipitation over most of the ACF Basin over the last 90 days. And you can also see the dryness starting to creep into southwest Alabama, and certainly even worse over in Louisiana and Mississippi. The good news is the Florida Peninsula remains in pretty good shape despite being in the dry season and in the midst of another La Nina winter. So on the next slide, we'll start looking ahead, and this is the quantitative precipitation forecast from the National Weather Service, showing the impact of that Gulf low with precipitation amounts of over 1 inch forecasted for central Florida and plentiful rainfall for most of the Florida Peninsula. However, further north into inland Georgia and Alabama and most of the ACF, it's to remain dry over the next 7 days. And you can also see the projected track of this next nor'easter that hopefully, and the models keep going back and forth, but it'll stay a little further offshore and kind of prevent some of the worst winter weather conditions from impacting the eastern United States. So on the next slide, we'll take a look at the state of the Pacific Ocean and the current state of our La Nina. These are the current sea surface temperature anomalies, and you see the very strongly negative or colder than normal water temperatures across the equator in the Pacific. A very well developed La Nina phase. On the bottom graph is our Nino 3.4 index that's been hovering around that negative 1.0 degrees Celsius for the last couple months at least. So moderate, at least moderate, borderline strong La Nina conditions have been in place over the last couple months and are forecast to continue. So we'll look at that on the next slide. But first, let's just review the typical La Nina impacts, where we get this kind of jet stream configuration with basically troughing over the Mississippi Valley and a storm track that favors the Mississippi Valley and the Ohio River valleys, leaving the southeast basically warmer and drier than normal. And if we break it down, the rainfall departures month by month, we see that the dryness across the northern Gulf Coast and the lower ACF really sets in January and intensifies in the month of February, continues into March before this pattern tends to fade as we get into the spring months of April and May. So we'll go to the next slide and see how are we doing. If we remember, last year we were in similar La Nina conditions, but the typical La Nina climate patterns really failed to materialize. Well, I think this, if we're looking at the broad scale across all the United States, we're much more in line this year. Over on the left shows the precipitation departures from normal for the last 90 days. And we see very typical La Nina features like the excessive rainfall in the Pacific Northwest with dryness in Northern California. We see the dryness setting in across the northern Gulf Coast, especially Louisiana and East Texas, a little bit in the Florida Panhandle. We also see a pretty well-defined storm track up the Mississippi and Ohio River valleys. Again, very typical of La Nina. There are some local and regional differences, like most of interior Alabama and Georgia are actually wetter than normal right now. So that storm track has been a little more southerly this year than other years, but by and large, it's a familiar pattern. And the same with temperature over on the right, where we see much warmer than normal across Texas, Oklahoma, the Great Plains, even the northern Gulf Coast, the state of Florida, most of Alabama and Georgia, all running 1 to 2, maybe 3 degrees warmer than normal over the last 90 days. So the large scale temperature and precipitation patterns are fairly consistent with what we'd expect from La Nina this year. So on the next slide, we'll look at the forecast for the Pacific Ocean. 100% chance this La Nina is going to continue through the December, January, February season. As we get out into the spring season, March, April, and May, we're still at close to 70% chance that it'll persist into the spring season. And over on the right just shows the model guidance for the Nino 3.4 region. It should stay below that La Nina threshold. The ensemble average is through March, April, and May. There are a couple crazy outliers as usual that we tend to ignore. So we'll go to the next slide, and with that in mind, we'll take a look at the official 3-month outlook for the months of February through April from NOAA's Climate Prediction Center, and very much favoring the typical La Nina pattern with strong chances of above normal temperatures for Texas and portions of the desert Southwest, the northern Gulf Coast, most of the eastern United States for that matter. And over on the right is the precipitation forecast, again favoring below normal rainfall for the desert Southwest, the northern Gulf Coast, and certainly the state of Florida. But you also see that storm track up the Ohio River Valley of above normal chances of above normal rainfall. So the seasonal forecast very much favors continued La Nina conditions. On the next slide, I think I have one more forecast product. It's the seasonal drought outlook. And this is cut back a little bit from last month's, where they showed drought development as likely, extending well up into South Alabama and South Georgia. With recent rainfall, they've cut that back a bit, but now it's mostly the state of Florida and coastal Georgia and the Carolinas where drought development is still pegged as likely in the next 1 to 3 months. So we will go ahead and summarize. We've been in a very active pattern, bringing severe weather and winter weather over the last month or more. The national patterns of rainfall and temperature, however, are fairly consistent with La Nina. The ACF is entirely drought-free right now. Development continues for the coastal Carolinas, Southwest Alabama, and North Florida. We've seen above normal rainfall for North Georgia and North Alabama at 30 days, but most of the ACF basin is near normal if we look at the 90-day time frame. La Nina conditions and advisory continues, over a 95% chance it will last through the winter and nearly a 70% chance it will last into spring. With that in mind, the CPC seasonal forecast heavily favors above normal temperatures and below normal rainfall for the next 3 months. And drought development is possible for Florida and the lower ACF as La Nina conditions continue.
Thank you, David. Now, Tom Littlepage will give us a state of Alabama input.
Okay, first slide, or keep going. Yeah, as David talked about, this is a map of Alabama, and we've consistently seen varying weather patterns, but they have missed the southwestern and far western portions of the state. Next slide. And as a result of this variability, we haven't seen enough impacts to pull together a meeting of our mid group or to change the drought declaration, but we are continuing to monitor conditions. Next slide. And some of that information that we update is on our website, so I'd encourage you to refer to that if you need some site-specific information. And then the money slide in terms of the status. You know, basically, we've been wrestling with whether to call a meeting of our monitoring and impact group, and I think over the next 2 to 3 weeks, we will probably look at trying to do that. But we've consistently seen these patterns that come in and put some rain, even snow, especially in the northern portions of the state, but have consistently missed the southwestern portions of the state. The good news is that given the La Nina phenomenon that David alluded to, it has not historically, it has not impacted Alabama to the degree we normally see La Nina, especially in the southeastern portions or even the ACF portions in Alabama have not been hit as hard as sometimes in the past. Bottom line is we don't see any water availability issues, so that's all good. And there have been enough clear patterns where our ag impacts have been relatively minor in terms of the ability to get in, get crops out or get crops planted. So those have been good over the past several months. But we're continuing to monitor conditions. So this has been a really good period of time from a drought perspective where we haven't had a lot of significant impact. And obviously the big issue is what happens as we move into spring and the summer cycle, and we'll be watching that closely. Last slide is, like I said, we don't have a current meeting scheduled of our MIG, but we will probably be pulling something together in the near future. And if you need to be on that distribution list, just don't hesitate to contact me. Thank you. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Tom. Next up is Paul Ankhorn with our stream flows and groundwater conditions.
Hey there, good afternoon. I'm not a little bit here, so I pulled some graphics from the drought portal dashboard that Meredith is going to show later on. So I hope I don't steal too much of your thunder here, but I did want to highlight some of the tools that are available, especially with regard to the USGS data. So the slides are a bit of a mash between what I've previously shown in the past, you know, from WaterWatch and then from the new drought portal. So looking at the left, that's our previous conditions from back in November, and that's the southeast. And then on the right, this is from the dashboard, and this is again showing the southeast. So you can see these are USGS real-time stations. So this is the real-time flow compared to historic values for the period of record for each of these gauges. So within the ACF basin, the green stream gauges are showing normal conditions. We have a few sites that are showing much above, and then some stations which are low, shown here in the red and the brown, or darker red. Of course, these are indications of regulation there on the lower hooch, but as a whole, the whole basin is showing real-time conditions to be within normal. So we have plenty of water. So we'll move to the next slide. And this is what you guys are used to. I typically show, this is an indication of hydrologic drought. This is the below normal 7-day average stream flow. So again, as David and Tom both showed, there is no drought in the ACF, and none in the southeast really of any amount. And so, yeah, we'll show the next slide. So this is the 28-day average stream flow. So this is the daily average, and then it's ranked with historic daily averages. So it's intended to show sort of the long-term trend for the past 4 weeks. And again, this is from the dashboard. And so within the ACF basin, you'll see majority of the streams are showing normal conditions for the 28-day average. And then in the middle section around Atlanta, we're showing some above normal conditions. Again, just highlighting that this is the 28-day average. You can toggle between the real time and the 28-day average. And then you'll see too, there's an overlay of the current U.S. Drought Monitor, which is showing some D0, D1s in Western Alabama and North Carolina. All right, we'll look at the next slide. Staying with the 28-day average, this wanted to highlight the Lake Lanier inflows. So if you hover above with your mouse with any of these stream gauges, you can get a direct link. And so what I have circled there is Chattahoochee River, Cornelia. This is one of the main stems into Lanier. And so it's currently running at 28-day average, which is ranked normal. And so if you were to click that link, we'll go to the next slide. That will take you to the USGS page. This is our new tool for viewing real-time data. So you can see you can pick between 7, 30 days or 1 year. And this is showing actual real-time stream flow. So we switch from 28-day average now to instantaneous discharge. And one tool that I like to highlight down in the lower right there, you see a box where you can compare it to last year. So the last year there's the darker blue color, and so we're seeing about a 30% increase in discharge for this time last year. So I'm comparing that with the graph on the right, which is what you guys are more used to me showing here. But you can see this time last year, the 28-day average flow was in the above normal, but currently we're in the normal, as we pointed out on the previous slide. So we'll move to the next slide. I'm not going to hit all of the stations, but you can see the Drought Dashboard is plenty of tools to use and is very user-friendly. So with that said, we'll switch over to groundwater. This is the real-time groundwater network for Georgia. And as you can see, these are the daily averages referenced to the historic average for that day. And so the basin as a whole is ranking normal to above normal. And then Doherty County is showing above normal, and Miller County, circled there on the lower right, is showing conditions to be in the normal range. So I'm not going to show the data for the groundwater wells, just going to wrap up with a summary here. Real-time stream flow in the ACF basin is currently ranking from above normal to low. The below normal 7-day average indicates the ACF basin to be drought-free. The 28-day average stream flow for the Chattahoochee River is in above normal to normal range, and that is the same for the Flint River. And then groundwater levels at our reference sites are currently ranked above normal and normal respectively. Okay, Rachel, that wraps it up. Thanks.
Thanks, Paul. Now we have Jody Juan with our ACF Reservoir Conditions.
Thank you, Rachel. So beginning at the top of the ACF, we have Beaufort and Lake Lanier. Looks like we're still a little bit above topical conservation in our winter pool elevation, but we should make a slow transition back. As Paul has said, we're above normal. So as you can see here, we are above the pool elevation at Lake Lanier with no problems in the foreseeable future. Next slide, please. At West Point, same thing. We are slightly above our winter pool elevation, and hopefully we can continue this trend to help us with the refill. As you guys can tell, the refill period is coming soon, and surprisingly is towards the end of January, so that's coming up. We're hoping to keep the pool either half a foot or a foot above the winter pool elevation to prepare if, say, we get like a drought. Sorry, said the D word, not the drought, but drier or less normal conditions that we normally get during May time or between February and May. Next point. Walter F. George, we are slightly above here, and we'll make the transition slowly back to the winter pool elevation, and that's because we are currently supporting the ramp down at Woodruff. Next, please. And lastly, Jim Woodruff has will continue to ramp down and will be about 76.87 in the next couple weeks. We are currently supporting navigation, and that usually requires around 16,000 to about 16,500 CFS for discharge. Next slide. Overall, the ACF is within composite zone 1 and will be in composite zone 1 for the next 5 weeks. Next slide, please. So in summary, all ACF basin projects are currently in their winter pool elevation. Lake Lanier and West Point are slightly above due to the past couple of rainstorms, and we're slowly making that transition back down to winter pool elevation. Woodruff is currently ramping down because of the rainstorms, and all projects are slowly transitioning again. All projects are within zone 1, and we are currently meeting all downstream minimum flow requirements. The ACF system conservation storage is in zone 1 and is forecasted to remain in zone 1 for the next few weeks. These charts are updated weekly, and they are up on the Drought Dashboard. So they will pull the images from our site. So if you guys do see any discrepancies, because we are in the middle of updating it weekly. Thank you.
Thanks, Jody. Now, Sam Lucas will give us Apalachicola Bay salinity levels.
All right, thank you, Rachel, and hi, everyone. As always, we're going to be focusing on 3 of our water quality stations within the Apalachicola Bay system. We have a station at East Bay, and this area functions as the nursery area of the system. Then we have Cap Point and Dry Bar, and both of these stations are located on historic oyster bars. Our water quality stations collect data 365 days of the year at 15-minute intervals, and we can go ahead and look at our first station's data. All right, so this is for Cap Point, and for all of the data today, we're going to be looking at it through December 31st, 2021. We exchanged loggers right at the beginning of 2022, and we'll actually be going out next week to retrieve and download data. So I'll have a little bit more up-to-date data at our next webinar. But just looking at December, the majority of our salinity data is within the 25th to 75th percentile range. We did not have any weather events or truly anything out of the ordinary occurring. So this is pretty average for what it should be looking like. It did dip down a little bit toward the end of the month. So I'll be interested to see if that trend continues into January or if it bounces back up into the 25th to 75th percentile range. All right, next slide, please. All right, and it's looking pretty similar at our dry bar station as well. Again, mainly in the 25th to 75th percentile range. It does increase just a little bit at the end of December, but otherwise this station, it hasn't been influenced by river flow. We haven't gotten a ton of water. And the river discharge really isn't that high at this time. Next slide. All right, and then for East Bay Bottom, this one had a little bit more change than the other two. Again, we're in that yellow, the 25th to 75th percentile range, but there is a large dip toward the end of the month. And the location of the system is very close to the river. And there was just a slight increase in discharge, but really not a ton to impact the whole system. So I think I think this may be the cause of that dip in salinity. But again, just like the other ones, I'll be interested to see what's happening for the rest of January as well. And if it stays low, or if we go back into the 25th to 75th percentile range. All right. And for this slide, I am referencing the Drought Dashboard that Meredith will be speaking at toward the end of the webinar. But I did want to go ahead and highlight it. On the dashboard, there's an area called the Coastal Salinity Index, and this is developed by the U.S. Geological Survey. And here you can look at areas throughout the United States, mainly coastal areas, and look at the salinities. And I went ahead and brought up the Apalachicola region, and the little blue circle, that is our East Bay station. And right now it's reporting normal salinity conditions for January 23rd. I actually went and looked at it today, and as of yesterday as well, it's reporting normal salinity conditions. In addition, for this tool, you also can use it to look at drought throughout the country as well. So that's why our barrier island at the bottom of this graph here is yellow. It's just reporting that it's normally dry. This is not reporting salinity. So I just wanted to go ahead and make that clear. Just the dots are reporting salinity. All right, thank you. All right, and just a summary, really all of our stations are reporting mainly within the 25th to 75th percentile range. There hasn't been any large weather events. We've gotten some rain, but really not too much. And river discharge isn't extremely high. It did experience a little increase throughout the month, but otherwise things are looking good over here in Apalachicola Bay.
Thanks, Sam. Now, Jeff Dober will give our stream flow forecast for the ACF.
All righty, thank you, Rachel. Can you see my screen?
No, you actually moved it away. I can see
did.
it. It's just in presenter mode now.
Okay. Okay, let's see here.
I think display settings on the top left where you had it. Okay.
Top left.
Well, now you're in a
Can you
different.
see it on the screen?
Yeah,
Actually,
you can make it full screen and that
I-
presenter icon on the bottom right now.
What if I do this? Can you see it now?
I cannot.
No. Okay.
There, you just went full screen, right?
Okay, super. Yeah. So now
Perfect.
you can see it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. So let's start off looking at the 10-day ensemble forecast, looking 10 days out in the future. And we'll start at the top of the Chattahoochee River here at Vinings. As Paul pointed out, we're running a little bit above normal up there in the stream flows in the upper Chattahoochee. But our 10-day forecasts are showing, the probabilistic forecasts are showing no significant rainfall events or precipitation events over the next 10 days. So we'll probably see some of the stream flows start to creep back down more probably into the normal range based on the short-term 10-day forecast. And that's the same thing here. We'll go down the river. Now we're at Whitesburg. Same signal here, not much in the way of any significant rain system, precipitation systems for the next 10 days. There is a little bit of an outlier being pointed out that right here, showing out there on the February 2nd that we may have another rain event. But for the most part, the line is flat, showing stream flows will probably remain where they're at for the next week or so. So now we'll jump over to the top of the Flint River here at Lovejoy. And again, more of the same, nothing significant. As well as now we're going down the Flint to Albany, Georgia. Same thing there. And now going down to the Apalachicola here, river near Bluntstown. As Jody pointed out, the river is falling down there as water is falling out from those past rain events, and will settle back into more normal base flows down there as well through the 10-day period. So flooding is not unusual this time of year. We're pretty much in that primary recharge period, or heading into the peak of it here in the 4th week of January. But for the most part, looking across Georgia and the ACF Basin, all the green squares there, they're showing conditions are below flood. We do have some action stage level rises in the lower Altamaha in the coastal plain of Georgia. But for the ACF, not much going on, which is good news. So leading to our overall monthly forecast for February of 2022, as Paul said, right now we're running above normal in that upper Chattahoochee area, but for the most part near normal in the Flint and the middle to lower Chattahoochee, as well as the Apalachicola. And we think those trends will continue, and especially with the drier weather here in the short to medium term, we'll probably see those stream flows in the upper Chattahoochee fall off quite a bit as well. Another impacting favorable note, as Jody pointed out, the target pools for several of the reservoirs will begin to increase here in late winter and the spring, and this will allow for stream flows to come down as well a little bit as they hold water. So looking further out from February through April here, we're looking at the same trend, and we're going to continue that trend, and we'll see some volatility within these within this long range, short intervals, or maybe above or below normal stream flows. But overall, we're expecting near normal stream flows through this period, February through April at this time. And our probability pie charts here also indicating that being the case too. More or less 1 out of 2 chance of near normal, 1 out of 3 chance at being above normal, and a 1 out of 5 to 1 out of 4 chance of being below normal for right now into the spring season. So overall, the summary: no real flooding expected in the Chattahoochee or Flint or Apalachicola in the next 10 days. And our 1 month and 3 month stream flow forecast calls for near normal stream flows over the period. And that's all I had. Thank you, and I will pass it back to you.
Thanks, Jeff. Now we're going to hear from Meredith Muth from NIDIS, introducing the ACF Basin Drought and Water Dashboard.
Hi, Rachel. Can you see my screen?
I'm seeing a white screen.
Okay, hold on.
There, perfect.
All right, there we go. Okay, so anyways, hi everyone. I'm really excited to be here today for the launch of the ACF Drought and Water Dashboard. I know that many of you have been hearing about this for years, and most of you have played a part somehow in the development. So your fingerprints are all over this. This is really a tribute to the community that is on this webinar and a much broader community as well. It really takes a village. And so I just want to quickly do a shout out to the core members of our village, in particular to Mark and Kristen over at Albany State and Georgia Water Planning Policy Center, who really took the lead in making sure that we had some meaningful stakeholder engagement and feedback into the development. So this is really user driven. Also to Rachel from Auburn and Chris from the Chattahoochee Riverkeeper, who was just integral throughout all steps, especially with the story map, and our core team at the National Centers for Environmental Information, who actually took all of the ideas and made it happen, used the magic of the development. So I have about 15 minutes here to give you guys a quick little taste I wanted to start with just a couple of slides to just kind of ground everyone on where this came from and what went into developing it. I think it's really important because a lot did go into the development. As a reminder, as many of you know, the ACF was one of the original drought early warning systems, the regional DEWs established by NIDIS. It's been around since 2009. And it was through that regional network that this idea to bring together all these different sources of drought and water information across the 3 states, pull it together in one place. This is where the idea happened in 2016. Now, since then, the ACF DEWs has been kind of combined with the Coastal Carolina DEWs, and we now have a much broader Southeast DEWs, a Southeast regional network, which is also great. But NIDIS wanted to honor our commitment to the ACF DEWs, and so we were proud to work with our partners in creating this dashboard. I mentioned that it was very user-driven from the start. Many of you might have joined me and others back in Eastport nearly 2 years ago from this day, back in 2020, for the first of 4 user listening sessions. Then COVID hit and we went virtual. After those 4 sessions, we spent a good year building a prototype. It actually ended up being a little more complicated than we originally imagined, but it totally worked out. Oh, and then we went ahead, took this prototype and offered it to the partners for review and to the public for review. Use that refinement, use that input through user sessions, one-on-one calls with the states, with the Army Corps and others, and through some very targeted usability testing to come up with some refinements, and then the launch, which just happened officially yesterday when this website went live. I just wanted to highlight one thing I'm most proud of is the participation we had in the input gathering phases and reviewing the prototypes. It wasn't just the government, it wasn't just the federal agency, a lot of state and local governments as well, but also look at this list. We had some companies, we had NGOs, private sector, universities, a really balanced and broad input went into this. I'm not going to go through the details on these slides, just to let you know that these are the kind of questions we asked this broad audience. How do you use drought information? Like, what do you even do with it? And a huge range of uses, which is great, but also a challenge sometimes when you're building a product or tool, because you can't be as narrow. We're trying to reach as large of an audience as we possibly can. We also asked, what are people looking for? And a lot of, visualization, ease of use, comprehensive, timely, regional context. One other thing that came out loud and clear, especially starting at that Eastport meeting, was that yes, the maps and the data and the information, that's all really important, but can you give us that context to help us interpret, to help us understand why drought matters in the ACF, and help us maybe educate the public a little bit on how drought planning is done, how water is managed. And so that's where the idea for story map came from. We also, again, had that nice balance of participation when we had people review prototypes. And then, especially in the last few months, we've taken all of this last bit of information to really refine what I'm going to walk you through right now. A couple things I wanted to highlight here, though, is that we had a few requests for additional information. Stream flow forecast we are including. We're using the a 5-day river stage forecast data from the Weather Service, and it's not there right now, but it will be up in just a couple of days, so hang tight. Groundwater is something we're working with USGS on, and hopefully that will be coming shortly. And then we were also able to add more information in terms of reservoir data, especially the core project. So you'll see that as well. So what I'm going to do now is just do a quick live walkthrough. Rachel, while I'm pulling up, let's see, here we go. Can you do me a favor, Rachel, and put the link in the chat?
Yes, doing that right now.
Great. And then you can see my slide, right? Or my web browser. Okay, great. So welcome to the home page. This is the page we really love for you to just bookmark, and you can go to as often as you would like. What you'll see, this is based out of the U.S. Drought Portal, which is drought.gov, but we have an entire section just focused on the ACF Drought and Water Dashboard. And really there's 4 sections here. There's this dashboard home, which will just give you kind of a curated list of the top maps and information based on our outreach to different users in the community. And then you can go to maps and data, which has even more maps and data. You have easy access to the story map, and then a key area where you can get additional resources, especially important linkages to state level information. So now I'm just gonna kind of take you through a little guided tour here. I'll be Julie, your cruise director. As you scroll through, you'll see right now at the top, we have a little bit of key sound bites for you of what's happening in the region. These are updated automatically. Obviously not any drought right now, as we already mentioned. So some of these maps are not very exciting, but drought will come back, unfortunately. So we are ready. Our first section is current conditions. And you'll see we've decided to highlight 3 kind of key indicators to give anybody a quick glimpse, a quick feel of what drought is like right now in the basin. Here's a U.S. drought monitor. We have a precipitation, in this case, 15-day % of normal. And it was also a common request to include the Lawn and Garden Moisture Index from University of Alabama and the Alabama Office of the State Climatologist. Now, before I start going through all of the other attributes in this dashboard, let me tell you a little bit about what you can do with each and every map you have. First of all, they're all interactive in the sense that you can scroll in, you can scroll out. Maybe you want a bigger view of the southeast. You'll notice right now I'm looking at the U.S. Drought Monitor. Anywhere you go, you can learn more about that product. We have lots of information, how to get the data, where the data came from, and links to the main websites. One really popular use of this dashboard, of feedback we've heard so far, is the ability to essentially share these maps. So for example, you hit that little download button I just hit. You can even change your data layers. You can add county lines, and you can play around with a couple of other things related to how it looks, and then just click Save Map, and that's it. It'll save it in a very easy way for you to copy and paste in your reports, presentations, to boards, committees, etc. And so you can do that with all of these. Another thing you can do is you can go directly to a county page, and I'll do that towards the end. So this is kind of the highlights of current conditions. Now we're going to stream flow and reservoir conditions. And Jody mentioned that we did include the composite conservation flood storage map that the Corps produces on a weekly basis. This is not an interactive map. This is the same one that is on the website of the Corps. So you can go straight to their website as well and get more information about this product. But we knew how important it is to this community, so we wanted to make sure it was front and center. We also have, again, based on feedback from the users, we wanted to make sure we have some kind of interactive way to look at the lake levels of the different projects. And we've also, this is an original map that's only found here on the dashboard. We're able to, at a glance, see what storage level and what zone it is in by color. So right now you can see that most of these are in flood storage, a couple in zone 1 normal operations. And you can also click on these to get more information on current levels as well as the 1-week forecast. So we're really excited to have that, and thank you so much to the Corps for helping us make that happen. And here's some of the USGS information that Paul mentioned. You can have real-time stream flow. Again, all of these are interactive. You can look at any station you want. As always, zoom in, zoom out. And we also did 28-day stream flow, all from the USGS. Now, those were just kind of current conditions from a climate perspective, as well as from a hydrological perspective. If you want a little glimpse at what's happening in the future, we have the U.S. drought outlooks at monthly and seasonal. We also have precipitation forecast. If you're looking for a little more near-term information, 2-day and 7-day. Again, all of these, you can always go in and you can add additional layers as well. Many of these you can see are layered right now with the U.S. Drought Monitor. So you can look at a particular parameter over the Drought Monitor. And what about the question of, well, what is drought? How does this compare to previous droughts? What about drought in this area historically. And so this is one of our more popular products. It's an ability to look at historical drought conditions. And for the first time, we have it within specifically the river basin. You can also explore this data at the state level, at the county level, at the national level, but this is the only place you'll find it at the river basin level. And so you can look at it going back to 2000, the US Drought Monitor. You can also go back to 1895 using the Standard Precipitation Index, which characterizes meteorological drought. And if you really want to go farther back, we have a paleoclimate record, the Living Blended Drought product, where you can actually go much farther back, all the way, back to 300 AD there. And as always, you can download images, and you can always click on Explore Historical Drought Maps to look at more. And then an easy way to also get to the story map from here. So this is your home page. Again, this is your gateway page you want to have bookmarked. On all of these little sections, the current conditions and stream flow and reservoir conditions, you saw something that said view more. Well, all you have, this is the same as looking at view more maps and data. So I'm going to go ahead and take you there right now. And the layout is the same, so you should start getting familiar with how this looks. We have our sound bites. We have some additional current conditions. So here we have our temperature as well as precipitation. And as always, an opportunity to explore right here we use Climate Engine for these data sets. And if you're not familiar with Climate Engine, you might want to check it out. It's a great tool to explore a wide variety of weather and climate information. Stream flow, again, we have real-time 28-day, and we will have that forecast product out, the 5-day forecast product out soon. Reservoir conditions we went through, but here's where we can get into a little bit of the impact data. Well, how does drought overlay with what we're seeing in the agriculture and livestock sector, for example? And so here you can go ahead and take a look that overlays the US Drought Monitor with crops and livestock by county. You can also get some sound bites of how much area, acres of corn, hay, etc., are currently under drought. And again, we define drought in this context as the US Drought Monitor D1 to D4 category. That might be different than drought declarations by the state or the county. And then for soil moisture, because soil moisture is so important to this community, to the southeast, and the soils dry out so quickly, we've included a couple of other. We have NASA's SPORT product, as well as blended soil moisture product, in addition to the Lawn and Garden Moisture Index. And then here's some that was already highlighted, environmental impacts, which is, we have the Keach-Byram Drought Index, which is related to wildfires, coastal salinity index mentioned previously by Sam, and even an air quality index, all overlaid with the Drought Monitor. And then a lot more in terms of future conditions. Here you can look at your temperature and precipitation outlooks that were shown by David. We also have evaporative demand forecast. We had a presentation on this last year, which is really, I think, very useful for this part of the country. And then, of course, your historical data. I'm going to go back to Story Map at the end. You can also go to additional resources. So this is where you can have register for various webinar series or find active drought information statements from the National Weather Service weather forecast offices. Links to look at things by county and local, and then really important, our state partners, where you can access information from Alabama, Florida, Georgia, federal partners, as well as a lot of other drought resources. We have drought and water plans, more maps, sector impacts, and meteorological conditions. So a lot here. Before I go to the story map, I just wanted to go back to what I mentioned, which is if you're interested in looking at county information, these are all, we've listed here all of the counties within the ACF Basin boundary. I'm just going to click a random one. Here's Clayton, Georgia. And you have a whole page here just for your county that has a lot of, actually has everything that we've already shown you before. It's just here at the county level. And again, you can copy and share and use those maps as much as you'd like. So the last thing I'm going to show you right now is the story map. I'll go ahead and you can full the view screen. And as always, you can go back to the dashboard. So it's pretty easy to navigate now, thanks to a lot of input. So again, this dashboard was meant to be a way to help understand a bit of the context of the dashboard itself and what you're seeing in the maps, but also to just educate the public on why drought matters. And so let's see, I'm looking at the time. I'll give you all time on your own. Please check it out if you haven't. Again, for everything you're seeing, we'd love some feedback, but it starts with just a kind of a walking you through some historical droughts so that you can, I mean, even though there's a lot more to the ACF than just droughts, a lot of times it's too much water than too little water. We're kind of walking through history of some of the big ones and the impacts. Then we walk through the major rivers. So we spend just a little bit of time on each of the rivers. First the Chattahoochee, then the Flint, then the Apalachicola. And then we spend a little time talking about how water is managed in the basin. And this is where you can learn a little bit about the different Corps projects, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and how, and their authorization process and storage capacity, just a little bit more. Not meant to be an in-depth tutorial, but give a flavor and give you links to move on. And then we have some information for each of the states, a little bit more on Georgia, since more of the ACF is in Georgia, but talking about water planning processes, regulation of water use, and then moving down into the Flint. And here we are with Alabama. For each state, we have a nice timeline for water planning. Many of these activities, which are in these timelines, actually led to further, were informed by previous droughts. And here's a map that Tom Littlepage shows us every month from the Office of Water Resources in terms of the drought declaration. And then Florida as well, with specific emphasis on Northwest Florida. And then we spent a little bit of time talking about the impacts of drought in the ACF. And this can range from agriculture to recreation, wildfires, and also ecosystems, both in particular rivers, wetlands, and coastal, including Apalachicola Bay. And then finally, we wrap it up with, you know, well, what's next? What do we know about, can we forecast the next drought? Do we know what's happening? A little bit of time talking about La Nina, which is very good timing since we've been talking about it a lot in these webinars this year. A little bit on what we know in terms of climate trends, and then also just talking about ACF managing water in the context of multiple hazards, not just droughts. And of course, ending it on a happy note with some examples of how the broader basin community at different levels, at the regional level, at local levels, are really working together to really just make it happen, to make a change in conserving water and being prepared for the next drought. And so with that, I know we're almost out of time. I'm just going to go quickly back to my slide right here and wrap it up. That as now that you have your little walkthrough, we really hope that you can familiar yourself with this dashboard, because it is highly likely that we're going to start kind of, since we have a lot of the same information here as we do the webinar, we may start transitioning the community to look to the dashboard for the most updated information rather than a monthly webinar. Let us know what you think. Any feedback is always appreciated. Help us spread the word, put it out on social media. You should have some links, put the link on your websites where it makes sense. And when drought returns, then we will go ahead and relaunch and remind people that this resource is here. And I think the key thing here is that people are like, oh, why? If only it was drought, we could launch it and people would pay more attention. But honestly, this is the time to build these types of products and tools and to have these conversations before the next drought. So we're doing the right thing. And I just want to, again, thank everyone for everything they've done to help make this happen. And so with that, I'll turn it back to you, Rachel.
All right, thank you, Meredith. It's exciting to have the dashboard launched. It's been a long time in the making. So we had a few upcoming events. We're not really going to have much time for questions, but you can send those questions to Meredith or myself by email if there is something you'd like to ask about the dashboard or anything that was presented today. The 2022 ACF Waters Conference in late April in Albany, Georgia is upcoming. You can contact Gail Cowie with any questions you may have about the event. Her email is listed. There is also a drought prediction and water availability national listening session series hosted by NIDIS. The first installation, I'm putting the registration link in the chat, is upcoming February 9th. That's a Wednesday from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern. There's also several more upcoming listening sessions listed there. This will be part of the recording we post to YouTube, and I'll also include this in our summary email. Lastly, and Meredith, if you have anything specific you'd like to bring up with this, the Southeast Dues Partner Dialogue meeting that is scheduled for March 1st through 2nd in Atlanta, Georgia is upcoming. Registration is set to close on the 14th. Topics to be covered: drought planning, drought communication, flash drought, and drought impact reporting, meant to get folks together, hopefully in person, and to talk about things that apply to the whole region as we transition to the Southeast Dues. Meredith, anything you'd like to add?
No, but I'm happy to stay on if there are any questions or feedback on anything heard today.
Great. All right, thank you to all of our speakers today. Our next webinar will be Tuesday, February 22nd, same time, 1 p.m. Eastern. There will be a video recording of this webinar posted to YouTube within 48 hours, as well as a summary email that will hit your inbox. Thank you everyone for being here today.